Welcome to Roots of Politics, the channel for political education and political philosophy without ideological bias. First of all, there is a German version of this video too, so you can watch the same content in German if you like. Sabine Hossenfelder is a German physicist who reaches millions of viewers with her YouTube videos. In several of her videos, Dr. Hossenfelder argues that there is no such thing as free will. Summarized briefly in my own words, her reasoning goes roughly like this. Since everything in the physical macroscopic world is determined by cause and effect relationships, and each effect becomes the cause of something else, the entire history of the universe, from the Big Bang onwards, must be predetermined. If that's true, then processes within the human brain are also predetermined. And if the processes in the brain are predetermined, free will cannot exist, because it would be determined too. This is not a new idea. Historically, this worldview first emerged with the concept of Laplace's demon. Pierre-Simon Laplace lived from 1749 to 1827. He was a French mathematician who believed that a demon with sufficient intelligence, knowledge of all natural laws, and constants could calculate the entire history of the universe in the finest detail. Today, instead of a demon, we would say computer. We now know that such a demon is impossible for various reasons. However, this does not change the notion held by some scientists that the course of the universe, and thus human will, is determined. In my opinion, this is an epistemological category error. Dr. Hossenfelder uses nature scientific reasoning to explain the world. But nature science was never invented for that purpose. Allow me to explain. Nature science provides provisional knowledge intended to explain observations. However, it doesn't explain the world itself. This works fairly well. Philosophy, on the other hand, tries to explain the world itself, and that works rather poorly. Unfortunately, nothing better has been invented so far. Let me illustrate this with two examples. The existence of God can neither be proven nor disproven. If God exists, being almighty, he could grant each person free will. This is precisely what the three monotheistic religions claim. Human beings possess free will. From a Christian theological viewpoint, God must even grant humans free will. It could also be the case that we are living in a simulation, similar to a kind of matrix. In that case, the creators of the matrix would certainly have the capability to implement free will into humans. One may assign a low probability to the existence of God or the matrix, but there are numerous conceptual models that could enable humans to have free will. Even if each model individually has only a small likelihood, collectively they result in a non-negligible probability. Put simply, nature science only partially represents reality and explicitly claims its knowledge to be provisionally valid, subject to revision as new findings limit the scope of previous understanding. The question of whether free will exists could probably only be resolved if we fully understood human consciousness. But we are far from that. Since we cannot currently know for certain whether free will exists, what should we assume until the matter is conclusively clarified, if it ever can be? The answer is clear. We should always assume free will. Why? Because assuming free will works, and assuming the opposite does not. The concept of the individual, as developed by the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, is closely linked to the idea of free will. The Renaissance concept of human dignity also rises or falls with free will, as this concept asserts that the individual can freely choose between good and evil, from which dignity arises. The entire Western civilization depends on the assumption of free will. Without it, the principle of individual responsibility vanishes. People would simply act as they do because they could not act otherwise. Removing the idea of free will creates a vacuum that real-world politics would immediately fill with individuals or groups who no longer respect individual preferences, since those preferences theoretically do not exist, and who impose their own choices on people. Another possibility is the emergence of a bureaucratic dystopia driven by the belief that individuals must be protected from themselves down to the smallest detail. In any case, denying people their free will is undoubtedly harmful. It leads to nothing good. I won't bother citing current or historical examples here, though sadly they abound. Shortly said, those who deny the existence of free will are opening Pandora's box. Once, Sabine Hossenfelder was asked why a particular mathematical equation describing a natural phenomenon looks exactly as it does. Her answer was, because it works. That's precisely my answer to Dr. Hossenfelder regarding why we should assume free will. Because it works. Because it works.